Welcome to the Indirect Cost Overview training. We're delighted to provide you with an overview of indirect costs and administrative costs. The contents of this presentation were developed by Andre Hilton, Director of Indirect Cost Division, United States Department of Education, Office of Finance and Operations, and presented by Lindsay Russell with New Additions Consulting. Slide 2, disclaimer. This session provides an overview of indirect costs and allowability of costs. Specific questions related to allowability should be addressed in partnership with your Disability Innovation Fund DIF program officer, direct costs, program costs, or the Indirect Cost Division, General Administrative Indirect Costs, to ensure compliance and accountability of grant funds to taxpayers. Slide 3, who is responsible for my indirect cost rate negotiation? Let's discuss the who in responsibility related to indirect costs. We all share in the responsibility to the public purpose of the federal awards. Allowable costs are of particular importance, specifically the entity that is responsible for the review and approval of indirect cost rates. The cognizant agency for indirect costs is responsible for reviewing, negotiating, and approving indirect cost rate negotiations for recipients. Recipients are entities that receive direct federal funding. Pass-through entities are recipients that provide a subaward to a subrecipient, including lower-tier subrecipients, to carry out a part of federal program. Subrecipients are entities that receive a subaward from a pass-through entity to carry out part of a federal award. The ED webpage for Cognizant Determination Assistance is made available for reference at the end of this presentation and available in the description below the video. Slide 4. How is responsibility determined for my indirect cost rate negotiation? Let's discuss how responsibility is determined in indirect costs. Generally, the federal agency that provides the largest dollar amount of direct federal awards, unless different arrangements are agreed to by the concerned federal agencies. For nonprofit organizations, that is 3 years, and state and local governments, 5 years. Exceptions include Indian tribal governments, Department of Interior, state education agencies and local education agencies, Department of Education, Institutes of Higher Education, Department of Health and Human Services, DHHS, or the Office of Naval Research, ONR. If a subrecipient entity 2 CFR 200.332 does not have direct federal awards, then the pass-through entity is responsible for negotiating an indirect rate or cost allocation plan. The ED webpage for Cognizant Determination Assistance is made available for reference at the end of this presentation and available in the description below the video. Slide 5, Cognizant's Determination Table. The Regulatory Indirect Cost Responsibility Table displayed on the screen is designed to assist you with navigating who is responsible for indirect cost rate negotiations, and the links will be available for access at the end of this presentation. Reading the slide from left to right, you have State Education Agencies, SEAs, Appendix 5, Paragraph F1. Local Education Agency, LEA, Appendix 5, 34 CFR, 75.561C, and 76.561C. Nonprofit, Appendix 4, Paragraph C2A. State and local agencies, SLAs, Appendix 5, Paragraph F1. Institutes of Higher Education, IHEs, Appendix 3, paragraph C11. Territorial Governments, Appendix 5, paragraph F1. Indian Tribal Governments, Appendix 5, paragraph F1. And subrecipients, 2 CFR 200.332A4. Now, for example, Appendix 5 dictates that state education agencies, SEAs, responsibility is the United States Department of Education, whereas Institutes of Higher Education, IHEs, is designated for the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, and the Office of Naval Research, ONR. Slide 6, Indirect Cost Review Process for the United States Department of Education. At times, recipients and subrecipients ask, what does the indirect cost review process entail? The model below shows the 3-step process for review and approval of indirect cost rates. Step 1, 2 CFR 200.1, Indirect Cost Rate Proposal. Recipient submits certified indirect cost proposal. Indirect Cost Division, ICD, provides an acknowledgement letter provided to confirm official receipt and acceptance of the indirect cost proposal. Step 2, 2 CFR 200.1, Cognizant Agency for Indirect Costs. The reviewer negotiator conducts risk assessment and adequacy assessment of proposal. The team lead and director conducts initial quality control reviews. The reviewer requests supporting documentation to substantiate recipient's proposed indirect cost rate. And step 3, Negotiated Indirect Cost Rate Agreement, NICRA. The reviewer analyzes documentation and provides technical assistance to the recipient. The team lead and director conducts secondary quality control reviews. And the director signs indirect cost rate agreement and transmits to recipient. Slide 7, what are indirect cost rate types? Indirect cost rate types provides recipients and subrecipients with the applicable allowable indirect cost rate types to comply with allowable indirect cost drawdowns. On the slide is a triangle showing the hierarchy. At the top, you have restricted indirect cost rate, 34 CFR 75.563 and 76.563 statutory. In the middle, you have training indirect cost rate, 34 CFR 75.562 departmental regulatory. And at the bottom of the triangle is unrestricted and de minimis indirect cost rates, 2 CFR 200 regulatory. The hierarchy shows the applicable rate types for education awards. Please note that indirect cost rate types lower in the hierarchy may not be applied to awards higher in the hierarchy. For example, an unrestricted or de minimis indirect cost rate may not be used on restricted or training programs. Slide 8. What is a program administrative limitation or cap? Program administrative limitations, also known as administrative caps, provide recipients and subrecipients with maximum allowable administrative recovery allowed based on program regulations or statutes. General rule, administrative limitation caps apply to the combination of indirect costs plus direct costs, which equals the administrative cost limitations. Allowable federal award base, $1,000. Administrative limitation percentage, 5%. Administrative ceiling, $50, which is calculated as 5% of $1,000. The maximum amount of administrative costs, which is direct administrative plus indirect cost recovery for the program, is $50. The United States Office of Management and Budget Uniform Guidance FAQ from January 15th, 2025, question 51, are indirect costs and administrative costs considered the same when a federal statute places a limit or cap on administrative costs? Link is made available for reference at the end of this presentation and available in the description below the video. Slide 9. What is a program administrative limitation or cap continuation? B. Exception, administrative limitation caps. If statutory or regulatory authorized administrative cost limitations apply to direct administrative costs, 2 CFR 200.413B(c), so the allowable federal award base, $1,000, administrative limitation percentage, 5%, administrative ceiling, the administrative ceiling is $50, which is calculated as 5% of $1,000. The maximum amount of administrative costs, which is direct administrative recovery for the program, is $50. The indirect cost recovery is subject to the availability of funds, 34 CFR 75.564A and 34 CFR 76.564A. It is important to note that DIF programs do not currently have administrative limitations or caps. The United States Office of Management and Budget Uniform Guidance FAQ from January 15th, 2025, question 51, are indirect costs and administrative costs considered the same when a federal statute places a limit or cap on administrative costs? Link is made available for reference at the end of this presentation and available in the description below the video. Slide 10. What are the indirect cost rate types and administrative limitation caps for 84.421C, 84.421D, 84.421E, and 84.421F. Let's discuss the indirect cost rate information and administrative cost limitations that you'll see in the Federal Register before our practical application. Indirect cost rate information. So these programs use an unrestricted indirect cost rate. Administrative cost limitation. This program does not include any program-specific limitation on administrative expenses. All administrative expenses must be reasonable and necessary and conform to the cost principles described in 2 CFR Part 200, Subpart E of the Uniform Guidance. Please visit the Federal Register as a source of indirect cost rate types and administrative cost limitations at www.federalregister.gov. Slide 11, Federal Register Practical Application. Let's leverage the Federal Register to obtain the indirect cost rate type and determine whether there's an administrative cap on 84.421C. Each of the next 3 slides contain the steps and a screenshot of the web page. Step 1, search federalregister.gov by Assistance Listing Number ALN, formerly known as the Catalog for Domestic Assistance CFDA number. Slide 12, Federal Register Practical Application Continuation. Step 2, select the Notice Inviting Applicants, NIA, also known as Notice of Funding Opportunity, NOFO. You may search by relevant, newest, and oldest. Please look at the initial communication that displays indirect cost rate information and administrative cost limitation. Slide 13, Federal Register Practical Application Continuation. Step 3, you may navigate to the indirect cost rate information and administrative cost limitation. Slide 14, indirect cost rate types and administrative cost caps. The slide now displays a chart that shows the Disability Innovation Fund, DIF, indirect cost rate types and administrative caps. Rehabilitation Training, Disability Innovation Fund, Career Advancement Initiative Model Demonstration Project, 84.421C, unrestricted indirect cost rate, no admin cap. Disability Innovation Fund, sub-minimum wage to competitive integrated employment, innovative model demonstration project, 84.421D, unrestricted indirect cost rate, no admin cap. Disability Innovation Fund, Pathway to Partnerships, innovative model demonstration project, 84.421E, unrestricted indirect cost rate, no admin cap. Disability Innovation Fund, creating a 21st century workforce of youth and adults with disabilities through the transformation of education, career, and competitive integrated employment model demonstration project. 84.421F, unrestricted indirect cost rate, no admin cap. So you'll note that the DIF programs do not have administrative caps. However, it is important to be aware of administrative caps in the instance that other federal programs have requirements. A helpful resource is www.federalregister.gov. You can search by Assistance Listing Number, ALN. Slide 15. What are the responsibilities of the federal award recipients, pass-through entities, and subrecipients? The responsibilities of recipients are the following. Know the allowable indirect cost rate type for the federal award, 84.421C, 84.421D, 84.421E, and 84.421F are unrestricted. If there are any administrative limitations on the award, reimbursement of indirect costs is subject to availability of funds and statutory or administrative restrictions. 34 CFR 75.564A. Application of the negotiated indirect cost rate, determination of the direct cost base, or cost allocation plan charging methodology must be in accordance with the agreement or plan approved by the grantee's cognizant agency. 34 CFR 75.564A. And ensure your indirect cost rate agreement is current. A grantee that meets the requirements in 2 CFR 200.414F may elect to charge the de minimis rate of modified total direct costs, MTDC, specified in that provision, which may be used indefinitely. The de minimis rate may not be used on programs that have statutory or regulatory restrictions on the indirect cost rate. No documentation is required to justify the de minimis rate. 34 CFR 75.560C. The indirect cost resource will provide you with a foundation of the regulations and documents to help comply with the federal regulations related to indirect costs, budget, and allowable costs. We have the Uniform Guidance, Subpart E, Appendix 3, Colleges and Universities, Appendix 4, Nonprofit Organizations, and Appendix 7, State, Local, and Tribal Government Entities. Education Department, General Administrative Regulations, EDGAR, Part 34, CFR 75, Subpart Indirect Costs, and 34 CFR 76, Subpart Indirect Costs. Grant Award Notification, GAN, Attachments 1, 2, and 4. Ed Form 524, Budget Information, Non-Construction Programs Instructions. The United States Department of Education Indirect Cost Division website. The United States Department of Education Indirect Cost Training. And the United States Department of Education Indirect Cost email, which is indirectcostdivision@ed.gov. Slide 17, web pages referenced in this session. Slides 3 and 4 reference who is responsible for my indirect cost rate negotiation from the U.S. Department of Education. Slides 8 and 9, 2 CFR 200, frequently asked questions, and slides 10 and 14, the Federal Register home. Slide 18, thank you. Thank you all for joining us for an overview of indirect cost. Just a reminder, specific questions related to allowability should be addressed in partnership with your Disability Innovation Fund, DIF, program officer, or the Indirect Cost Division to ensure compliance and accountability of grant funds to taxpayers. Disclaimer. The contents of this presentation were developed under contract 9199-0023 D0037-9199-0024 F0395 from the U.S. Department of Education Department. The department does not mandate or prescribe practices, models, or other activities described or discussed in this presentation. The contents of this presentation may contain examples of, adaptations of, and links to resources created and maintained by another public or private organization. The department does not control or guarantee the accuracy, relevance, timeliness, or completeness of this outside information. The contents of this presentation does not necessarily represent the policy of the department. This presentation is not intended to represent the views or policy of, or be an endorsement of any views expressed or materials provided by any federal agency. EDGAR 75.620.